sitting here. This session is called Neuroconvergence. Usually we're really open to conversation and question during our classes. We have less time than we usually do. So if there are any questions, we please encourage you to come and say hi to us afterwards, ask away. We definitely don't want you to feel like we're not open to that, but we are going to power through because otherwise we have the tendency to get a little bit lost, and we want to make sure that we get to all of the content for you today.
If we do a good enough job, we'll have some time at the end to do some.
I know us. We're going to get really close. And I'm going to go, Daddy, you've got 2 minutes and 3 paragraphs left to go.
Well, I'm Beast. This is Echo. We are the current International Master and Slave title holders. If you missed the last class, we competed in a contest back in March. That actually kind of began with a Colorado contest back in May of 19. But all of that just means that we get to come out here and do things like this. Get to visit with a lot of folks all across the country and across the world, sharing ideas and honestly learning from y'all as much as you might learn from us. We are in a 24/7 master-slave dynamic. I'm the master. She's my slave. And
I want to say something really brassy. I'm like, no, he said slave. Behave.
And slave, not necessarily submissive.
Yeah, does not mean the same thing.
And something that's kind of led us to this class is that we are both neurodivergent in different ways. And it's been really nice to see especially in the last few years, and I'll say this for the States, I don't know for sure because...
That's the last time we're saying that in this one, though. We must have used that 15 minutes ago, and I don't know if it's different in the States versus here. But we're talking about the States.
It definitely feels like it's become a little more acceptable to talk about things that are going on with us with mental health, things like that. And we're starting to kind of break some of that stigma. It's still there, but I feel like we're starting to make progress, and it's becoming more okay to talk about, which means it's becoming less of an issue for a lot of us because we're able to learn and get tools and really just being able to share what's going on.
And a lot of that is just we know what the hell's going on now. Whereas before, it's like, especially by the time you got to adults, if you weren't caught as a kid with like some test, some idea of what was going on, you were just like, oh, you're just a problem, you're difficult, you're aggressive, you're this, whatever it is. And then we just felt like we were shitty adults. And that's why you're also seeing a lot of adults now getting diagnosed with mental health illnesses, because there are DSM-5s, things like that we can actually do ourselves and go to our doctor and say, hey, this says the thing, can we at least have a conversation about it? And that's why a lot of that is happening as well. We also are doing a lot better of identifying these things when people are young, which is where a lot of my understanding of my own neurodivergence has come from.
Having said all that, I want to be very clear. Neither of us are mental health professionals. This is not meant to replace counseling. This is not meant to replace therapy. This is not meant to replace medication or anything else that might be appropriate for whatever might be going on. This is what we've learned from our experience and something that we felt was valuable enough to us and has made a big enough difference to us that we're sure someone else can use it. And if this helps either one of y'all, it was worth the trip. So the class is called Neuroconvergent. Obviously, when we're talking about mental health issues, we're kind of used to hearing neurodivergent, right? And so whether it's in a dynamic like we have or even just a relationship, a lot of times we really start to fall into the trap of viewing our different mental health concerns as a barrier. It's something that prevents us from gaining intimacy, it prevents us from gaining connection, it causes problems for us, whether it's especially early in our relationship, a lot of arguments, a lot of fights came out of it. Not specifically because of our diagnoses, but more because we didn't really know how to deal with it or what to do with it. And without any tools, that's just kind of where we would like.
Well, and again, going back to that thinking that you just had a really shitty personality, of the reality of it being, this is how I learned to survive. This is how I learned to be in relationships. This is how I understood showing affection. Because even if it wasn't our neurodivergence, it could have been our parents. It could have been our siblings. And what you get used to is generally what you see when you get older. So if you have a parent who's neurodiverse and undiagnosed or not understanding what that looks like, a lot of us gravitate towards that because we understand it. We know how to gain access to love from that person, even though it's not necessarily what we might want for ourselves, or those survival techniques aren't necessarily healthy. I know mine definitely aren't. And my favorite saying is, just because it's how we learn to survive doesn't mean it's how we have to live. And there are so many times that my coping strategies not only were not keeping me safe anymore because I don't need to be safe, I am safe, but they were actively working against the life I was trying to create for myself. And so I actually had to take some time, only a few months ago actually, and I sat down and I had a conversation with my brain of, thank you for doing exactly what I needed you to do to keep me safe at the time. I needed you then, but I don't anymore. So I'm going to put you down. Thank you. And I know that if I need you again, you're there. But I have got to put this down because you are hurting me now. It's not keeping me safe.
So a lot of what we're going to be sharing can be used in a pretty wide span of different things. But for sake of context and transparency, Echo and I have, again, different mental health concerns. I have BPD, which, I don't know if anyone's familiar, is often confused with bipolar. They are different. It's borderline personality disorder. And one of my biggest things there is like a crippling fear of abandonment at times. And a lot of times, regardless of what it is, there's those other things that kind of tag along for the ride, like anxiety and depression and those things that are common across a lot of people.
And then you pick someone who's toxically independent.
If you want to
Oh, yeah, sure. I have ASD1. It used to be referred to as Asperger's. Generally, we don't use that term anymore. So I really hate using numbers with our mental health diagnosis because you've made it competitive. Right? Like, what do you mean I'm only one? I want to be 3. I want to be the best at everything, regardless of what it is. And it also it allows people to minimize themselves without even thinking about it. It's like, oh, I just have ASD1. It's not like it's 2 or 3 or anything. And it minimizes yourself, so I don't like that either. And I was actually recently diagnosed with ADHD and attentive as well. So I have a couple of things going on. And again, same thing of stuff likes to tag along. Some diagnoses really like to be buddies. I feel like anxiety goes with everything. I also have anxiety, depression, not so much, but we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later. And while we're on that note, that's a really good reminder. Thank you. Later on, we are going to be talking about some significant issues that I had last year around suicide, depression, suicidal ideation. If you need to remove yourself from this room while we talk about that, please do. We will not be offended, even if it's before that. If you just want your feet telling you you've got to go buy that paddle upstairs, please do what you've got to do. If you want to hear the rest after that and you need to remove yourself from that section, please wait. I will ask our wife. Okay, thank you. I couldn't see you. To pop out and say, hey, we're good to come back in because we do have some content after that as well.
So take care of yourself if you need to. Mm-hmm. And then along with, again, her diagnosis, my BPD, you end up with trauma. Trauma. Different things happen in your life, whether that's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. all those things tend to compound everything else that's going on. Right? It's kind of like adding a magnifying glass to an issue.
And not everything has to be abuse or trauma in that way. Some of us had really hard upbringings that didn't have a lot of financial backing and things like that. Those are all taken into consideration. And again, not any one thing is worse than the other. I'm tired of people saying it's not that, it's not this. Everything that happens as an adverse experience is called an ACE, an adverse childhood experience. Divorced parents, socioeconomic, having a teacher that was just not very good at building relationships and communicating, that's an adverse childhood experience, especially dependent on how it impacted you and what you took away from it. So never feel like anything is just or not enough to be considered as important or relevant.
So if you try to imagine what this was like, especially when we first got here.
They're terrible communicators.
You got Echo raised by a single mom.
He's also a hippie.
Very, very much the you don't need no man for nothing. You don't need no person for nothing. You don't need nobody else.
If she caught me saying I needed anyone, she's like, you do not need anyone for anything. And it got so much that when she married my stepdad, he was trying to help me with something. I'm like, what could you possibly help me, a woman, with? As a man, sit down. I got this. Like, that's what I was kind of doing. I actually said that to my stepdad.
And then you have me with this like crippling fear of abandonment and lacking the tools to be able to navigate discussions, arguments, without them blowing up into something. And so when that happens, can you imagine what her first reaction would be? Like, we're not seeing eye to eye, things are escalating, getting really heated. She's gonna want to step out.
Or he'll say sort of like, you don't need me, why don't you ever need me for anything? Like, well, I don't. Why would I tell you that? I don't need you. I want you here. I like it when you're here. But I don't need you for anything unless it's reaching the light bulb and I don't want to step ladder.
And so if she would say, hey, I need to take a few minutes, or especially early on when she wouldn't even say that, she would just go and get in her car and drive away. My immediate response is like, well, that was short while it lasted. I'll go cry now. She's not coming back. And to her, it was just, I need to calm down. I need to gather myself.
Yeah, especially when I've always considered myself to be a really aggressive and angry person, because angry is safe. If something happens, if you're angry, it's safer than being vulnerable or curious or anything like that. I'm incredibly reactionary, and no is also safe. Because if someone asks you a question, the answer is no, you are not putting yourself out there for anything, so I'm safe. I've actually had my kids come up to me and ask me if I want my favorite candy bar, and before they finish the question, no is out of my mouth. And then I go, well, actually, that would be good right now. Oh, but now I can't take it back. I guess I'm just not having candy. All right.
So yeah, it led to a lot of problems. It led to us having arguments or things that would really blow up far beyond any reasonable person would imagine the scope of this thing would be.
Yeah, you should not be having a 2-week argument about whether or not he ate one of my Maltesers.
And so it led us to trying to figure out, what's really going on. What hot button things are we hitting that are causing this? How do we de-escalate? How do we do these things? And really having to take a hard look at kind of some of those things that we've been dealing with, how we're wired. And whether that's some of her upbringing or I think, I don't want to speak out of turn, but fairly typical for folks with SU1 to sometimes miss sarcasm or teasing, take things very literally.
America hasn't helped with that. I used to be great at sarcasm, and now I don't get it.
And my need to constantly throw humor into tense situations to try to calm things down and make myself feel better about it and make me feel like I'm not pushing people away.
Appeasing.
Trauma response. Trauma response is the thing.
I think most people know the fight, flight, freeze, but there's also the fourth, which is fawn, which is, have you ever seen a dog and they just go onto their back and they're like, I submit? That's what fawning is. Like, what can I do to remove myself from this situation that feels awkward? What can I do to make you feel better so this just goes away? That's fawning.
As you try to...
Or appease, sorry. Flight, fight, freeze, appease as well.
It rhymes.
Yeah, I know, that's why I liked it.
The other one starts with an F.
I know, right? Which one?
So yeah, trying to figure out like how do we navigate these things, and what we realized was these things that we're seeing as a barrier, these things that we were seeing as something that we had to deal with in order to get where we wanted. We had to tolerate, put up with, to get to that point in our relationship that we were going for. Didn't have to be a barrier. Didn't have to be even really a negative thing. As long as we were willing to take an honest look at what was going on, we could actually kind of turn this into a superpower. And so that's where that idea of neuroconvergent came from, is using those divergences in ourselves as a way to bring ourselves closer together. And especially in our dynamic, and this doesn't have to be an MS dynamic, but if you're in any kind of power exchange or authority exchange dynamic, well, yeah, it works for relationships in general, but especially if you're in some kind of authority exchange dynamic, it can be something that actually feeds the dynamic as well as the relationship.
It's not something that you live with in spite of. It's something that enhances our life.
So again, for me, one of my big things is that fear of abandonment, and especially having times when we're together where I know that she's having to consciously make a choice to be there. It's not that she's just stuck there. It's not that, well, there's nothing else to do and it's a Tuesday night. I guess we'll sit here and watch some Netflix. But actually having to choose to be there is something that really helps me out. And so we came up with something. Actually, it's her idea.
I shouldn't have said anything.
Probably not. You kind of screwed yourself.
You did.
But no, we ended up doing pedicures. And for years, I had people telling me, oh yeah, you should do a pedicure, it's great. And me being, manly man, I'm like,
Sorry, not manly man. Toxic masculinity was something that we had to remove from surgically at times.
And so that idea, like, oh no, that's for women. That's for
what color are you toes right now?
They're the most amazing glittery red color. If I didn't think I would scare everyone, I'd throw my boots on.
Honestly, it's just more how long it would take to lace them.
But when I finally tried it, and this was just before we got together, when I finally tried getting a pedicure, I'm like, this is amazing. Why have I not done this before? Even like massage your calves and do all the things. Oh, it's fantastic. Anyway, so when we got together, this was something that I would go every now and then. I wasn't especially regular about it, but when I thought of it, when I had time and money and whatnot, I'd go and do this as a treat. And at one point, she decided, that's something that I can do. She's got the tools to do it. She's got the files and the little
stuff in my nail.
cheese grater looking thing. I don't know what they all are.
Parmesan grater.
But she has all the things. She's like, I can just do that for you.
What else do you use fitness? That's the stuff that comes in the Parmesan. Sorry, Parmesan. Forgot. Parmesan. England.
And so what we found was, by doing this once a month, one, she hates feet. So not only was it something that she had to make a choice to do, but she had to overcome a pretty significant, I won't say fear.
Hatred. Disgust. I don't know what word you're looking for. But yeah, that came from my mother as well.
So, again, it was something that she really had to make an effort to choose to be there. And it was something that, anyone that's gotten a pedicure, like, What's a really fast pedicure? Maybe half an hour?
I don't know, that bitch the other day didn't do after like 10 minutes.
If you count the time like soaking your feet and everything, that's longer than that. I don't know. Anyway, it's a significant commitment of time. Doing something that I know she's not super fond of.
Not that there's anything wrong with feet, I just don't like feet.
But it's a time that we get to spend together. In our dynamic, it's a thing where she gets to provide service. But it also really speaks to me in that need for me to see that she's choosing to be there for me.
It soothes the stuff that comes with it. The anxiety, the thinking, the spiral, right? Of like you start the thought and then you just can't stop, and then everything goes. Well, again, this is my neurodivergence. So I don't know if it's the same for you. Then everything goes black, and all you can think about is that one thing. Like it soothes that because I'm sat in front of him doing something he knows I don't like, but I'm doing it because it's for him, and that's important.
So it gives us that regular moment once a month to do it. It feeds me. It brings us closer together, and she gets to pick what color my toes in.
Easter's great. Halloween not so much. You always pick like slime colors. That's what you want. Anyway.
I thought like the bright hunter orange thing was kind of cool. I also learned that my choice in toenail polish is not the same as hers.
That's why I picked colors now.
So did you want to talk about the? I feel like we had another one in between there.
That's okay. We'll find it later. So one of the things for me is a lot of communication things and just being able to voice things in a way that isn't just me screaming it or being really, really pissed off. Because again, I was really late in life before I received any of my diagnoses. So I put in those survival techniques and those strategies, and it became something that was really damaging, not only to myself, but to all of my relationships, whether or not it was with Sarah, wife, the kids, work, any of those things. And in January 21, this is that moment. If anyone needs to take themselves, please do. Okay. In January 21, we were like a year into COVID, being at home, all of the things. I had never had any issues with depression or anything before, so I didn't know what to look out for or how I was feeling about anything. And on top of that, my job is very interpersonal. I can't do my job virtually, and I've been doing it for a year now. And before that, I'd broken my foot. I'd already been out for like 18 months by the time January 21 was coming along. And my job's really, really important to me. It's a big part of my identity, and I really want to do well at it. Doing well at it tells me that I feel like I'm a good person because I'm helping with all of these things and impacting teachers and changing the world one person at a time. And so by the time we got there, I was really dark, and it snuck up on me. It's kind of like, you remember fountain pens with the loose ink? You put a spot on the back of your hand, you're like, oh look, there's a big black spot. All right, that's fine. And then 30 seconds later, you hadn't realized that it's sunk into all of the little grooves in your hands, and it's just started spreading across the back of your hand, and then it's everywhere. That's what had happened with depression. It was like, oh, I feel like crap. And then I didn't notice it seep into everything. And it got to the point that I had made a plan for suicide. We were about 12 hours away from that when we ended up having a massive blowout, because it got to a point, I want to say about 16 hours before, I completely disengaged. Absolutely turned off everything that felt, everything that thought, everything that had any other idea than the plan that I had made. And that was the moment that he noticed. And he's given himself a hard time about this a few times, and we've spoken about it. He's like, I didn't see it, I didn't notice, and he's putting that on himself. I didn't give you anything to notice. I have spent over 30 years figuring out how to mask. I am really fucking good at it. There was nothing there for you to have called out or spoken about or reached me with until that moment. And as soon as it happened, he did. So, like I said, we've worked past that. But it ended up in this argument, and I just screamed my plan at him. And that was the thing that obviously changed it from an argument to a conversation. And one of the things that we did with that, speaking of the soothing or what happens or works for you, I struggle to get the real words out. I'll just get out something shitty or like aggressive and hope that someone can read between the lines of what's really going on, because I don't even understand. So with that, what we did was we lowered the stakes of our language. So rather than me having to go to him and saying, hey, I feel suicidal, I want to kill myself right now. That's a really hard thing to say to someone, especially when you feel like you're already failing, because you shouldn't feel like that. You should feel something else. Like, don't shit on yourself is my new quote for everyone. So instead of using that language, we shifted it to my brain's being really mean, or my brain's an asshole right now. And that's all I had to say, because that was the cue for him to figure out what we were doing next. And sometimes it was, I need us to spend more time together. I want us to watch a movie and have a cigar tonight. Or is I just needed someone in the world to know where I was right now. So having the opportunity to have the conversations about what would be easy for you to say, that was the conversation that I needed. And we know other people that don't even say anything. They have physical cues in their house. And if it had gotten much worse for us, we probably would have gone down that road as well. But this worked for us. There's some people that have like a statue in their house. And when something's going on, the statue moves to another place. And that's the cue for the other person to go and check in and figure out what's going on. So especially when you have that verbal barrier, especially if you haven't had great experiences with being open and vulnerable with someone, or having someone weaponize that against you in the future. I've definitely had people throw it in my face in an argument if I felt a certain way or been open about what was going on for me. It's like, well, then you did this, or you felt this way, or you had this thought at one point. So every single experience I had had before this told me that it wasn't safe to have a conversation, especially one that was really vulnerable in the language that I was using. So we just had to lower the stakes. And also saying my brain's being an asshole, I like to be funny, I like to have humor, I like it to be light. So that really worked for me to just be like, you just need to know. I just need you to know.
I can remember what the other was. Yeah. So, again, a lot of, with the way that Echo's led the process, a lot of her first go-to was always anger.
Oh, I know what you're going with.
And even when she doesn't, even when she's not necessarily angry about the thing, if it's anxiety, if it's stress, it comes out as anger. And so we would often struggle, when she's coming home from work, and she's already talked a lot about how her work can be pretty intense. She's working with folks that are in crisis, whether it's kids, teachers, school staff.
I go in court, all of my paperwork going into court with kids that are it's just, it can be rough.
And so she would come home and she would be in that mode of I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm stressed, I'm angry, whatever it is, I'm angry, and walk in the door, all the things need to happen, they need to happen right now. And if they don't, I'm going to need more of this stuff.
Or they should have happened 3 fucking hours ago, and why am I telling you again?
And especially, that's bad enough in a typical relationship, but especially in our dynamic, if she's coming home and the slave is barking orders at master, telling her,
that went well.
Lead balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tried a few different things to try to figure out how do we reset this, how do we
transition,
connect when she gets home. And one of the things we came up with was what we call the awkward hug. I'm gonna hope Family Guy is up in here.
It is. It is.
Yeah, sweet. Okay.
People smoke weed here too.
So anyone that's watched Family Guy probably familiar with this, but they have this habit of writing these jokes, and the joke is kind of funny at first, and it keeps going, and then kind of stops being funny. And we get it. Peter Griffin's like, and he like goes on for like 3 minutes. But then something odd happens. They keep going and going and going. And at some point, this like, really weird thing happens where it starts to become funny again. And that's kind of how we saw these hugs. And I read about it, and there was studies behind it that talk about the science and all the things that happen, chemically in your brain with serotonin and dopamine and all the things. And they're, it's got to be worth a shot.
I'm also pretty touch averse. So I was super excited about this idea.
So brought it to her and said, hey, I think it's at least worth a try. She agreed. I was shocked. And the first time we did it, it's basically hugging for a full 30 seconds.
I know it sounds really stupid, doesn't it? But try it.
So even imagining handshakes. And I know, I get told quite often that Americans shake hands differently than English folks. You've complained about it. Apparently we're like...
They hurt. It's not that it lasts too long or anything. It's just I'm a delicate person, really. Why are you trying to crush all of the bones in me?
And we're always taught, firm
That's it. It's a power shake, isn't it, more so?
It's just
yeah.
Let me assert my dominance.
Exactly.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
But if you shake hands for a second or two, it's all right, that's cool. And if someone hangs on a little too long, it's this is getting weird.
Yeah.
And especially the ones that want to keep talking to you and making eye contact and they will stop shaking. It's
and then you're finally pulling away, and then the dreaded second hand.
That's the one.
I call it the bear trap.
Yeah.
Mr. Shaky Hands, man.
And then they come in towards you.
Yes.
Yes. That's
Go.
it. Yes. And you're going backwards, and they're coming forwards, but you're thinking, I'll get away in a moment. And 15 minutes later, they're still there.
Yeah.
That's one. Yeah.
So, I don't know if anyone's had a hug that's felt like that. And you get the hug that's nice.
You do the double tap.
And then, you tap out and you're like, I'm good, I'm done, I give up.
Yeah.
And they don't let go. It's we actually have he's a
Lovely.
beautiful person and a great friend now, but when we first met him, it took getting used to. Because he would do this, and aside from holding on a little too long, he'd be leaning on your shoulder, and then you get a little.
Right in the ear. And that's an emotional activator for me. Anyway, from my trauma history, it was just oh my god, don't touch me again.
So I will acknowledge if you go home and try this, or even if you try this after the class, it's gonna feel weird. That's why we call it the awkward hug. About 5 seconds is about the most any of us are kind of conditioned to expect. About 10 seconds it starts to feel really, really freaking weird, and you're gonna want to let go and run away. But stick it out. By about 20 seconds, all those chemicals start to flow in your brain, and by the end of 30 seconds, usually you will have kind of melted into it, and it's an amazing thing. Anyone that's energy players, anyone that kind of experiences that energy of people, auras, all those things, especially if you're into the woo and the spiritual side of even BDSM kink.
Yeah.
It's an awesome way to connect and sync up with someone. For that matter, I know we're having a after party here a little later. If you've got a scene going, try this as a way to start your scene. It does unbelievable things. But again, coming back to us, when she would come home in this bad boss mode, bitch mode, we would find each other and do our awkward hug, and we would find that everything just kind of connected.
Recently. And more than anything, it reminded me where I was and that I was safe. And I needed that.
And so for us, it really came back to looking at where are these roadblocks for us? What are the things that we were stumbling? and what things can we put in place to try to, if we can be proactive, all the better. So things like the pedicure. We're not waiting until something happens to do that. That's something that we regularly schedule. Things like the
when I come home.
It's pretty much any time she comes home.
Well, not if I just like ran to the store, right? But if I went to work or I've been gone for more than 3 hours.
Which, especially during COVID, I kind of missed, because we spent a lot of time where we didn't even go to the grocery store, and they just dropped it off. If she doesn't leave, she can't come back, and then we can't do the hug, and it was really awkward then. But things like lowering the stakes, you don't always know what's going to be needed. But being able to have those conversations and being able to look at the things and say, okay, I know these are the things I struggle with. I know these are the things you struggle with. How can we align these things? And whether it's ritual and protocol, if you're in a power exchange dynamic, or even just agreements and things that you come to if you're in a vanilla relationship.
Well, and that's
anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. There's so many different things that like I said, this is usually 2 hours, so we're condensing on it. There's lots of different things. One of the things that was really helpful for us was using actual affective statements. Now, most of us have been taught affective statements of I feel X when you do Y. And we've been taught that that's good because you're saying why it was a problem and how you felt. You are putting yourself in an argument. I promise. Because most of the time we don't even use feeling words. We use disrespected, ignored. Those aren't feeling words. And if I say to him, if he's on his phone playing a game, and so you're ignoring me, what is the first thing he's going to say? I'm not ignoring you. I can play my game and do that at the same time. And so that's not the problem. The problem is not that he's looking at his phone, and it's not that I'm being ignored. So we have to dig in deeper for a start. You hear a lot of people say about where is this coming from with your behavioral? Where really? Where is your trauma response? Where are these feelings coming from? But one of the things that we've been speaking about recently is it's not a where question, it's all of the WI questions. Where is it coming from? Can you identify where that feeling is? Who is it that you're talking to? Is it Echo now with all of the tools that I have? Or am I talking to 6-year-old Echo from when that trauma was happening? Because that's where we go back to when we're triggered. We go back to that age. So having those conversations are different and those needs are different. Who am I addressing? When did this happen? Is it something recent or is it something in the past? Is it people that I can talk to who it's happening with now, or is it people that died and I'll never be able to answer those questions? It's all of them. And also, why is this something that you're carrying with you? Not to say it's bad. Why is not a bad question, but it can help us gain clarity to the bigger picture. And then with that, instead of saying I feel X when you do Y, it would be the start is the same, but then you add onto the end of would you be willing to Z? Because when I say when you do X, I feel Y, that's a blaming statement. And I'm saying you make me feel like shit when you do this. Regardless of how I frame it and how much I make it pretty and I don't use aggressive words, that's still the message. And most people will get defensive in that because I would like to think most of us don't go out of our way to make people feel like crap. So we want to defend ourselves of this is why I didn't intend it to do this. How many of you have heard that? Or I didn't mean that. It's intent versus impact. Just because your intent was this does not mean that this was the impact of it. So when we say those, it puts people in a corner and you haven't told them where to go. So now they're just panicking in a corner and we're going to have those inflammatory conversations to what happened most of the time. But when I say, would you be willing to do this? I've told him where this like emergency exit is. I've told him how we can move past this and what I need in order to do it. And now we've entered into a negotiation. Because if I say, would you be willing to do this? He can say yes or no. With the example of the phone, because this is an actual real example, I can still hate that game. But he's got a game on his phone, and every time I come home, he's on that game. And again, really hard job, and when I get home, I want to be able to connect and just talk for a minute. And when he's looking at his phone, we're not connected. And it started with, I feel like you're ignoring me when you're looking at your phone, and that makes me feel bad. And again, he's going to go with, I'm not ignoring yours. So instead, it was, when I get home and you're playing on your phone and you're not looking at me, it feels like we're not connecting. And that really hurts because I need this time with you when I come home because it's really important to me. Would you be willing to put your phone down for 5 minutes when I first come home just for us to connect? And he can either say, yep, no problems whatsoever, or what he actually said was, most of the time, I think that's going to be the case, and I can absolutely do that. But there are occasions where I've spent time or patience trying to get to this certain thing, so I might just need 10 minutes grace to finish up what I'm doing before I can put my phone down, because then I can actually focus on you, and I don't have to worry about this other thing. Would that work for you? Would that meet the need that you are explaining to me right now? And then I get to say yes or no. And we go back and forth until we figure out what's going to work for both of us. Because it's not just about my needs getting met, it's about allowing him to meet them. Just because we're in an MS dynamic doesn't mean that I'm the only one learning to submit. He had to learn to submit to my service. Because for him, that was hard to do. Because he doesn't want to bother me. He doesn't want my day to get any worse, especially if I've had a bad one. He had to learn to accept the service that I was wanting to give him and enjoy it. You agree?
So, like I mentioned at the start, none of this is to be a replacement for actual mental health treatment of any kind. And so, some of the things that we found.
I'm sorry, sir. I don't like that word. Can we change it? Treatment. Support. It's not about getting treated. It is about receiving support. Can we change that word? Thank you.
But one of the things we found, for example, Becca mentioned she was just recently diagnosed with ADHD.
Oh, I should take my meds in a minute. I'm trying to remind her.
All of the things that we do aren't going to be a replacement for that. And it's been a huge thing as she's figured out what meds work, what dosage works, all those things. It's made a huge improvement in our ability to connect. So be willing to have those conversations. Be willing to be vulnerable and transparent if this is something you're trying to get to. Because it's something where she's asked me, and it even made me really uncomfortable. She's asked me to help her with staying on top of her meds.
Mainly because he didn't want us to be getting into it. And me getting all crappy and him going, have you taken your meds today? Right? It's like going, are you on your period? So he was worried that saying that would have me literally rip his throat out from his body.
I feel like that's generally not a thing that
you are absolutely right. Never offer someone else that support unless they've asked for it.
But by being able to have those conversations and talk about it, we've been able to support each other with those things. And whether it is just making sure she's taking her meds or finding these tools that allow us to, again, converge and come closer together, it really starts with that. One, being honest with yourself about what's going on. Because sometimes, especially with that stigma floating around, we're our own worst enemy there. And a lot of times we may have an idea that something's going on. We may even had a diagnosis, had, counseling, something else that had worked for us in the past, and we decided that was enough. I'm good now. I can deal with this on my own. And we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to say it out loud because then it becomes real.
Well, then you failed again because you were doing great, and now you've had something come up that's put you back where you were, and now you feel like you're still that broken person or that failure in the relationship because you should know better. You know this stuff. I work in behavior and I tanked this really hard. It wasn't about knowing it. It was about building the skill. It's like a muscle.
So be honest with yourself and then be able to have that conversation with your partner. Narrow down those things. And we could have done all the things that we do all at once. It starts with one thing. And find that one thing that's going to make a big difference for us. And for us, that I think the really first big thing that really turned things around was the awkward hug. As silly as it sounds, as simple as it is, again, it's a hug. We all, most of us, I think, have had some practice. We might be out of practice with COVID, but it's not something that's foreign to us. But that one thing makes such a significant difference, and then it becomes easier to build on those successes. And then adding things like the pedicure, whatever else it might be for you, that speaks to you, that helps, soothe whatever thing you need, helps provide the thing that your partner needs, and being willing to fail. Because there have been several things that we have tried that kind of blew up on our face, did not work.
Including power exchange at one point, just so you know. We started as DS and oh my boy did we tank that.
And being able to come back around and say, hey, well, that blew up on our face. Do we try to fix this or do we scrap it and try something else?
We actually, when we first got together, our wife identified as submissive. She doesn't anymore. And she used to take off John's boots when he walked in the door. And I was feeling left out and butthurt and said something. And John was like, well, the other thing that I always do when I first get home is have a big glass of ice water. So how about you get that for me? On paper, it seems great. I'm providing a service. It was something that he was going to need, and that sounds awesome. The reality was Liv got to kneel at his feet and have this connective moment. I got sent to the fucking kitchen.
So yeah,
Did not.
Not everything works, and that's okay. Had we not had a few experiences like that, we probably wouldn't have found the things that did work.
And it's like you said, it's the small things. Most of us think that if there's something going on, we have to just whole overhaul of our relationships, just tweaks.
So with that, we do have about 5 minutes left.
Oh, yay!
So I wanted to open it up, and I think I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, sorry, I was people really haven't played too much with this. The awkward hug, did it kind of work on first dose?
No.
Or did
Well,
It didn't fail.
yeah.
It didn't work as well as it did later.
yes.
Yeah.
There was a growth
So
curve.
it's kind of practice effect.
Yeah, same with everything. It takes practice, especially again. Like I don't do I'm a lot better now because I've had practice. But yeah, I was just like, done. We're good. So when we're standing there, I go to let go and he just holds on. I'm like, oh, we're doing the thing. Oh, yeah. But yeah, more than it not working, I had to surrender to it. I had to try and get that out of it and remember that that's why we were doing it and what we were trying to achieve, rather than going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why is it 30 seconds here? Yes, because that was all I was thinking about, was getting out of it rather than what I was supposed to be getting out of it.
There's a lot of magic to it, but each person has to be willing to let go. Because even if you're not counting, if you're doing the hug, but your brain is thinking like, okay, so I still need to make dinner.
Kids.
Did I buy onions? I remember if I bought onions, I'm gonna have to run to the store. That's gonna take me a good 15 minutes.
Shit,
You're not
gas.
Each person has to be willing to commit to the idea. but there really is a lot of magic there. So if you're willing to try it, again, about that 20-second mark is where the magic starts. For most people, again, we're all wired a little differently, but for most people, about 20, 25 seconds.
Pay attention to your partner, who you're hugging feel, is what apparently my tell when I finally just melt into it is one of my knees will ever so slightly bend. Like I just go, oh. That's my tell. But you can feel it in the other person when that happens as well.
Any other questions?
Yes. I was yelling at Pride yesterday, so my voice is absolutely trashed at this point. But,
I think it sounds hot, but you can give me a excuse if you like.
Thanks. I have bipolar disorder, type 2 specifically, and I am very much the opposite. I love touch and I love affection and everything, but if I'm on a downer, I don't feel sexual, but I still want the affection and I still want to be held and I still want all of the kisses and the hugs and all of that. So I sometimes find it really difficult because I sometimes don't pick up on my own switches, even though I've had a good 10 years of a diagnosis, still trying to figure out where I go from steady to manic to down. And in either situation, I want the physical affection, but whether it's sexual or not is what changes. And I've had to, this is more of a comment, I've had to learn to sometimes be like, I could be on a downer and engage in a sexual activity and then to be like, no, and it's so hard to sometimes back out of it once you've initiated it. And yeah, it's just I don't know, I think it's my own personal anxiety of feeling like, will I then in turn be rejected? Will I be allowed to initiate at a later date? And it's more me. I've been very lucky with my partners that never put that on me, just my own internal dialogue and self-loathing, I guess. Where I'm like, oh, I've said no now, so they will not be interested at a later date, which is so hard. Like, how do you get rid of that self? I don't know the word. I can't find the word for it. But like, just talking trash about yourself to yourself.
It's really, really easy to see the value in other people more than yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of similar but different in the fact that I've never wanted to reach out for it because every time I wanted a hug or a kiss or to hold hands, because I've starved people of that, because sex is something that I've had a really complicated relationship with. As soon as I offer it's like offer a finger, take a hand type thing. So the second I was like, oh, hugs, they're like, oh my God, okay, we're doing the thing. She's interested in touch, let's have sex right now. So I would find myself not, even though I wanted it, because I didn't know how far it was going to be taken. And the biggest thing is like, it's a real conversation with yourself and your partners of ask or talk or there's an activity that I do. There's so many resources that I'm in my brain now, like just trying to figure out which one I'm going to pick. But one of the things that I did, and I've actually started doing it with our daughter, because she's been struggling with a lot of negative thoughts, of every time I have a thought that's crappy or negative, usually in the morning, the second you wake up, pay attention to what it is that you tell yourself. Write down 3 reasons that you know why bullshit. Not just wrong, bullshit. Because I guarantee you'll be able to find them.
Because it's so interesting, because logically I know this is crap. My partners have never.
It's not about your partners.
They've been amazing. It's just me just telling myself, oh, they hate me now.
Yeah,
of course they hate me now.
It is not about your partners.
At all.
No, and that's where we get stuck, because we're like, well, I know my partner knows this. I know that I know they're a good person. I know that they don't want to hurt me. It's not about that. It's about how you learn to gain access to love and what you're willing to sacrifice about yourself in order to have access to it. Because we will sacrifice bits about us left, right, and center just to get to someone, because society has taught us that we are not valuable unless we are legally partnered with someone. Like, I like you so much, let's get the government involved, right? But that's really what it comes down to, is like your experience and where that came from and how much of yourself you are willing to deny and let go of just to get to it. It's not about your partners. I will happily talk about this for 3 hours.
That later.
Sure. Because I know that we are 2 minutes over. I'm so sorry. I'm so
That's
sorry.
right. That's right. I have a little bit of leeway in today's schedule.
Oh, good. Thank you. But yeah, like I said, if anyone has any questions or they'd like to talk to us more, we have a QR code up here as well that has our link tree, and you have access to absolutely everything that we do. Please reach out and ask. Like we're not joking when we say that we encourage it.
Mm-hmm.
Ta-da!